Stand up if you ever argue with someone about whose mama makes the best peas and rice.
Oh my.
Really?
So,
Okay.
y'all never argue? Oh, shall I argue?
Is it done with the rice or who's cooking the best?
I guess who looks the best peas and rice? Okay. So here's the next one. Raise your hand if you're related to at least 3 people in this room and just found out. Well, not just found out, but at least if you're related inside this room. Yeah. Okay, what for one? 1 instead of 3.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Come on, that's cheating.
I'm related to them. I think in relation to Iran, except that. My friend here.
Okay. So that's the next one. Raise your hand if you ever lost your voice at jumping after jumping.
And I've only been once.
I was that's the first time I nobody's jumping with you lost your voice. Yeah, that's real. Okay, here's the next one. Okay. Stand up if you ever lied and said the storm wasn't that bad, so family can stop calling. Or maybe an issue or something wasn't that bad. So someone can stop bothering you. Okay, here's the next one. Okay, so let's say you go out. Stand up and you saw someone you know. Stand up and do that, but try to jump in and dive in. So the person will see you. I can see I lie. I like to see I'm true. Okay, so that's the next one. So, okay. Let me do that. Okay. Sign up if a pocket has ever followed you home and just stay there, or even follow you home. Yeah. Oh, okay, I will follow you at all. Like we promise in and then follow you all. No, would she? The one where I was gonna follow. Okay, so let me find that one. Okay, this is a good one. Some of you ever told someone you're 5 minutes away when you haven't even left your house yet? Now all y'all got set up, we all know. We don't think it's crazy. Yeah. Wow. Okay, this is the last one. Last one. Let me see that. Okay. Okay, so start up if you ever claim you were going home after jumping, but end up on the road until sunset or sunrise. Yeah. Okay, so that's all our icebreakers for today. As I'm already out there, I'll do our announcements. Breakfast afterwards. So it is Christmas season, which means this is our last meeting for the year. Okay, so we'll be drinking until January 21st. And if any of you are interested in becoming members, you can see anyone on the board, but particularly Nigel, he's the membership lead, but Nigel just stepped out. So, but you can reach out to any one of us and we'll be able to help you with that. And that is all.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Oh, that's good. All the time.
That's good.
All right, so tonight's conversation is about the psychology of financial success. So mindsets, the habits, and the systems that compound wealth. Our speaker lives at the intersection of numbers and behavior. Angelo Butler is the he's the manager of corporate advisory services at CFA, where he oversees the firm's advisory and research functions and helps leaders turn data into decisions. He holds a bachelor's in finance at the University of Bahamas and also a master's degree in international business economics at the Beijing Normal University. He is also a chartered financial accountant and analyst, a chartered financial analyst, charter holder, and currently the president of the CFA Society of the Bahamas. Angelo's lens is simple and sharp. Wealth is built by behavior before spreadsheets, by consistent habits, clear systems, and disciplined thinking that beats impulse. Please help me welcome our speaker this evening, Mr. Angelo Butler, CFA.
All right, good evening, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. So I just kind of like the topic mentions, look at some of the mindsets and habits I believe are crucial to building wealth, right? I know this isn't a time to really be saving money because it's Christmas and everyone is buying gifts and spending money as much as possible. But hopefully some of this you can carry into the new year. Whether it be for yourself or for someone else, your kids in the future, or assisting your parents with their financial decisions. So hopefully you can take away something from it. I'm not very rich per se yet or anything like that, but I find myself to be a chronic saver. I've been saving probably since I was about 10, and I kind of give a background of my story a bit. When I was young, I would pack bags at a grocery store where my mother worked, right? I would be there in the afternoon. So I would instead of just sitting down doing nothing, I would pack bags and customers would tip me. At a very young age, my mom took me to Scotiabank right on Marquis Palmdale. It's not even there anymore. But I opened an account, and every time I park it, I made $5, $10, I would give it to her. She would go down there and deposit it for me. And back then that's when you had the little books and you had to take, some of you may not even know about the books, right? They would print your balance on the little book. You would see interest 25, 26 cents. And that's kind of really where I first learned about saving, investing, earning funds. And I shoved that straight through high school. When I started, my first job, I started saving. I think I was making maybe $100 a week. And, I worked on a boat and we also made tips. So from there, I said I would save all of my salary and whatever I made in tips is kind of what I lived off, particularly through college and things like that. So like I said, I've been a chronic saver for a long time. Sometimes some may see it as unhealthy, but it's kind of been my mindset and it's been ingrained in me. So I think, young persons, the important thing is to kind of start saving as early as possible. Again, if you have kids, I have kids now, and I already try to teach my daughter a bit about it. So, but I think one of the most important things in terms of building wealth is, of course, understanding that savings is delayed gratification, right? Anything that you don't spend today is something anything that you put aside for the future is something you're sacrificing today. And I think in society now, it's as young people, we just live for the moment, right? And unfortunately, the moment feels good in that sense, but we have a long life ahead of us, generally speaking, right? The average person will live probably about 70, 75. So you see persons say, I worked, and I retired at 60, I passed away at a very young age, but that's the minority. And I think it's important not to assume that could be so it's important to plan for the future, sacrifice some short-term gratification today so that we can live in comfort in the future, because we are all going to get old. Thankfully, I think we all want to live as long as possible. But at the same time, you also have to enjoy life, right? And you have to find that happy medium between saving too much and spending too much. And that differs for every person. Some persons may have goals, they may want to hit $1, $2 million and they may save more. Some persons, they don't need a lot of money, they just need enough to get by and they want to, so you have to find that balance. But again, it starts with delayed gratification. And one of the biggest challenges in terms of mindset we have with persons at CFAL, and just generally speaking, is, a short-term mindset, right? Everyone wants to put $1,000 in CFAL today, and they want to wake up tomorrow and it's $2,000. And it just doesn't work like that, right? Anything that gives you 100% overnight is pretty much gambling, right? And then just as very few may win, for the most part, the majority will lose. So you have to understand that investing is a long-term process. Anyone that you see that has a lot of wealth, unless it's inherited, they were doing consistent investment amounts over time for that to add up to where they are today. And then that's what we kind of teach the persons at CFAL, right? You don't just come and start with $1,000 and put it there and leave it, forget, right? The goal should be to add something to it every month and benefit from the benefits of compounding. I think it's also important to learn about finance, right? I think finance would be something that's taught everywhere in schools, from high school on, because people should understand the options that are available. I think for everyone in there, you should go on websites like, I'm not going to be biased, CFAL, Leno, RF, look at CNBC, but find out what investment options are available to you as an individual, right? You should understand anyone knows what's a government bond?
Yeah.
Everyone? All right, so that's good.
Yeah, some person was really made up.
Okay, but government bonds are, you always say that the farmers government has so much debt, right? We always say where all this debt is. And, payments are largely the owners of the government's debt, right? Whether it's pension funds or not. So you can invest in the government debt to get some sort of return on your money. But it's just having the awareness that these things exist, because a lot of people do not know that they actually exist and what's available to them. So I would say as much as possible, stay up to date on what's happening in the financial world. Not just the things that sound sexy like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but with local options, you have to put money aside and again, understanding what's a reasonable rate of return or what you should actually earn. Right? And I think most persons, when they are investing, the first thing they ask is how much I could make. And you tell them 4%, but they say, man, that ain't enough. Right? But 4% when you're not doing any work on a safe investment where you'll get your money back is a good return anywhere around the world. So, the more you understand things like that, the more you will have a more disciplined approach to investing. You also got to understand I could get 10%, right, if I invest in something like the US market, but you could also wake up tomorrow when $1,000 is $500, right? So, but same time, if you're 20 years old and you're putting this money away for the future, you don't need to worry about things like that, right? So you have to get a mindset shift to say, I'm putting this away for 10 years, I'm not going to even look at it, right? If it declines tomorrow or the market goes down, I'm not going to worry, I'm not going to stress. A lot of persons, they say, okay, I like to take risks, I want a good return, and then the market turns and they panic and they sell. So you have to really get comfortable in an understanding of what investments actually is and what are realistic rates of return. If you're investing in something conservative, you're going to get 4 to 6 to 8%. Best case, right? But again, you're not doing any work. It's not like you're running a business. Many businesses today don't make 8%, right? Many apartment rentals don't make 8%. So in a lot of cases, people look at it and say, man, I could make this flipping cars, or I could, find something else. But you have to do a lot more work. You take a lot more risk with doing that. So in investments, everything is risk versus return. The less risk you take, the lower your return will be. Generally speaking, the higher risk you take, the higher your expected return. Just as you take more risk doesn't mean you will automatically make more. Typically, you should, but it doesn't automatically equate to it. I think the most important thing is to get an understanding of what the different investment options are and what are realistic rates of return. So you can then say, okay, I look at my retirement plan and I want to have $1 million at 60. I've done research, I understand that I can make 5 to 6%, and you can find a simple calculator online that tells you this is how much you need to save per month to reach that goal. And just to show you the benefits of starting early, Let's hypothetically say you want to have $1 million at age 60, right? A 20-year-old today would need to save $500 a month to get there. It's not a lot of money, right? In the grand scheme of things, $500 per month doesn't sound like it could get you to $1 million, right? But if you're in 6% on your money from 20 at 60, you'll have $1 million. The later you start, if you start at 30, you need $850 per month. A 40-year-old has to save $2,000 per month for 20 years to get $1 million. So again, you see the benefit of starting as quickly as you can, as early as possible, because the benefits of compounding will work for you. And of course, I use 6%, which is conservative. If you use 10%, you only need to save, say, $300 per month, right? Some of us can spend $300 on a night out, right? So again, it's kind of prioritizing and making sure you do this is something that's important. So those are just some of the mindsets I think you have to have. You have to be willing to sacrifice short-term gratification, understand that this is a long-term thing, understand what you're investing in, but always find what they call them snake oil salesmen. People will sell you some sort of good dream, right? Anyone who comes to you and tells you they can get you 40, 50% on your money, you should question it, because it's very difficult to sustain anything like that. And you have the Ponzi schemes where, of course, when it's small, it's easy to pay persons out, but as it gets bigger, remember things like the moon, right? So those things are never sustainable, but no matter how much times persons see them, the prospect of a quick return will always win people. You always have to be mindful of that. And like I said, you have to balance risk versus reward. The younger you are, the more risks you should take, right? This is the time when you can afford to lose money. You can't lose money at 55 because 60 is right there, right? But if you're 20 and your investments go down 30, 40%, you still have 25 years to, right? And in time, you've seen that markets always recover. And as long as you're consistently investing, you'll never be wiped out in any single investment. So just some of the habits I think that are necessary to, once you have the mindset and some things you can do, I think you have to consistently save as much as possible. You should automate savings, right? Automated saving. Everyone in there works at a company that provides a pension. Yes? Yeah. All right. Your companies match your pension payment, right? A lot of times we go to places and persons don't capitalize on that. It's pretty much free money. The company is matching your pension. It's free money for you. So you should always maximize the pension match that the company offers. The company offers 7.5% or 10%, you should never just put 5% of your pension there. Because you're in essence giving a 5% free salary over the long term, right? And most companies you stay for like 5 years, that money then becomes yours. So things like that, automated savings, increase your pension to more than what's the minimum. It's your money, you will always have access to it. And sometimes persons say, well, I can't afford to do more, but of course, there are circumstances where things are hard and you may have specific circumstances where you can't save more. But if the government came tomorrow and said that NIB has to go up by 5%, no one in there could say no, right? So the government could just write a law and say you have to put 5% more of your salary. And if you tell yourself, I want to save an extra 2.5%, you just have to do it, right? And you'll find that you could live off what's money. If in your mind you never started working, you weren't working, you started making $2,000. If you weren't working, you're almost living. Of course, someone might have been helping you, but you should be able to, from a young age, set an amount that you want to save and just do it, right? Because, like I said, if government wakes up tomorrow and says they don't want to 2.5% income tax, of course there'll be pushback. But when they do it, everyone will pay it, right? So you gotta have to tell yourself, I'm going to save this amount, and this is what I'm going to do. And find a way as best as possible to live off the rest. Sometimes we encourage persons to let that come out of your pay immediately. So, nowadays there's technology where you can do online transfers. You can set up automatic payments. You can have salary deductions taken with your pay. A lot of persons use salary deductions, to make savings and investments, right? So the pot of money that you have, you just take it out, and then, like I said, you kind of try to live on what is left. You also have to control expenses. There's something anyone knows what is lifestyle inflation. right? The minute you start making more money, you start spending more money, right? And if you find yourself in a spiral, find that you're making $40,000, saving 10,000, now you're making $90,000, saving 10,000, right? And then a lot of times, it's hard to, fight off. I think it's natural. The more money you make, you want to, help yourself more. But I think again, if your mindset says that I want to save and I want to invest, you have to kind of make sure you stick with that going forward. Another thing too is, I always encourage, and this kind of how I live as well, if I want something, I don't just always buy it because I may have the money if I come. So I may say, let's say I want an iPhone, let's say over the next 3 months, I'll put $300 aside each month and then buy the phone, right? But again, it's kind of sacrificing the immediacy of it. Of course, if I have $1,000 in my account, I can just go buy it. But I don't just spend money because I have it saved, right? And like I said, for some persons, they may see that as something that doesn't make sense. But it's kind of helped me to avoid purchasing things I don't really need and kind of also budgeting towards things rather than large lump sum purchases. And I think a budget, as simple as it is something that we should all have as a habit, right? I've been keeping a budget from at least 2013, and then I'm keeping track of how much savings I have, where I have funds saved, so I can look back over the years and see how much I've saved each year. Takes maybe 5-10 minutes a month. But again, you should kind of know, I know, for example, how much goes to this place, how much goes to that place, right? So I think it's important that you could set up a simple Excel sheet, track how you progressed over the years and try to see, okay, this year I made $35,000, but I saved nothing, try to find out why and see where you could possibly fix that. You don't want to, in 10 years, find yourself at the same place you are today. So, people say your budget doesn't help, but I think that's very important to understand where your money is going. And at the end of the year, it can kind of be a litmus test to tell you whether or not you're achieving your goals. And of course, I think the compound value, you have to stay healthy mentally as well as physically. So I, encourage persons to, keep yourself together. You find yourself stressed, you spend money frivolously. A lot of times you may find yourself eating poorly or spending more money, eating or drinking. So you have to have that balance, right? And that's why I says you have to find a balance between saving too much and not living as well. And for each person, that's different. I can't tell you what percentage is right for you. But you kind of sit down, look at what you have and what you need to spend on it and find a number that works for you. And you could start with something and then increase it. You may say this year I want to save 10%, this next year I want to save 20% of my pay. And I feel like once you start to see the funds build up, you almost kind of become excited about it and you find yourself willing to save more, pushing yourself to save more. And again, once you save, you have to invest. You can't just have your money in the bank, right? Simple example I always use, inflation. Inflation will be 2% on average every year as long as you live. So every 30-40 years, the cost of living will double, right? No ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? So, simple example, anyone remembers how much a number 6 was in 2010? Right, around 7 years. And in 2009, when I left high school, the number 6 was $5.89. Anyone knows how much a number 6 is today? I mean, it's 10 years time will be 12. Ladies need you. It's a simple example to show you why you can't have your money today. If you left $5.89 in the bank in 2009, you would not be able to buy a number 6 today. But if you invested that, something conservative, you will have enough today to buy the number 6. So you have to invest your money to keep the value of it. And then you always want to earn something that exceeds inflation. So if inflation is 2 to 3% per year, that should be a benchmark. Don't invest in anything earning 1%. Fixed deposits, 0.25%, 0.5%. I'm not going to cut it because you're not even keeping up with the pace of inflation. So you have to invest in something that exceeds the rate of inflation to protect your money going forward. You mentioned $1 million. $1 million in 20 years won't be the same as it is today. So again, your target should be even more than that. But again, that's to be realistic and something reasonable. And there, like I said, numerous calculators you could find online, or you could call a financial professional and say, hey, this is my goal. How much do I need to save? What options are available? But if you don't have that mindset and that knowledge or willingness to see that out there, you'll find yourself 50, 60, not where you want to be. So I think that's it. Like I said, I gave some examples of the mindset, shift some habits. I think automating your savings is the best. Reviewing your budget and understanding where you are, where you should be, where you want to be, and every year checking that to see if you actually achieve what you want to achieve. And that's it. I don't know if anyone has any questions or willing to answer.
I think we take this last. I have a question. You mentioned with people, and I'm sure that there are a lot of congratulations on investment vehicles that people like to hear CPAP offers that young people who may be starting out 1 year, 2 years into their jobs, may be interested in taking advantage of some of the offerings that we've been seeing in terms of food for the recent energy deals. How can they tap into those things?
Okay, so the CPAD offers, of course, a number of products on a regular basis, right? So we have like a savings plan, a mutual fund. We have conservative mutual funds. You can invest in a bond fund that earns about 4%. We have a local fund that invests in stocks as well as bonds. So these are kind of, okay, if you don't want the hassle of managing your money yourself, or, it's hard to diversify $1,000, if we're being honest, right? If you take $1,000 and try to buy 10 stocks, the fees alone would eat up most of your money. So it's more efficient for you to put $1,000 in a mutual fund that's professionally managed, and you get the diversification. We also have international funds. So that has shares like Microsoft and Facebook and Apple, right? So whereas again, the important thing is to find out what's available, because you have persons say, I can't invest abroad, and that's not true, right? There are mutual funds you can invest in where you will have exposure to Alphabet and Caterpillar and John Deere, companies that make a lot of profit and export goods all around the world. And then from time to time, we would offer specific investments. So we did like the cruise port, and we did 2 recent projects for the power plant at Iraqi and power plant on the Ukraine Africa. So, we kind of keep a list of persons who may be interested. So if ever you can just send us an email, or I can give you my contact and you can email me and I can add you to a list. But we usually email these out, and the minimum one is like $1,000. If you work for the civil service, you can pay for it typically you have over 10 months to pay. So right now we just did one in July. So you have persons investing $100 per month to pay for their shares, right? And then we always try to provide that opportunity to it's primarily to civil servants, where they can pay over a month. So we always try to find ways that small investors can participate in these projects. But again, you have to reach out to us. We don't have everyone in the pharmacist's email, right? So, we put it on Facebook, we put it in the newspaper, we go on the radio, but not everyone hears it all of the time. So if you want for us to add you to, like a mailing list, so you can get up things like that, we can do that. And these come out, I would say, once every 2 to 3 years. So when they come up, they kind of jump on them. And, once they start getting dividends, no one sells the shares. So it's, after the fact, it becomes difficult to get in. So, but like I said, we have, there are a number of ongoing products that are available on a regular basis. You just have, we have a website, and our generation is a bit more tech savvy. So we have a website that has all the information on all of this. Frequently asked questions. We can browse it 5-10 minutes. If you have questions, call.
All right, so my question is related to local options versus US options. Like you spoke about bigger equities in the US, where this widely known that they make money and also like your results again. But my question is, what's your thoughts on the local market, which there's a lot of volume, but also I believe there's a lot more potential long term for a young person. So would you advise for a younger person to invest in something like, let's say, a food store that you know people are going to use as inelastic versus something like Apple, where the likelihood over the next 10 years is going to be, comparable to something like cable bombs, for instance. So what are your thoughts on local investing locally versus overgrowth?
I think to begin, the local investments are, the place to start to kind of get your feet wet, because the local market here is a bit less volatile than the US market, right? So we don't have days where you wake up and every stock is down 10%, right? So for you to get comfortable and understand what it is you're investing in, I think the local market is good. And again, like we consume a lot of these goods. If you buy good palm oil, buy not up shares, you palm oil, like get them dividends, you mentioned food sources like Avocado Market Limited. There's Poker, there's Doctor's Hospital, there's 17, 18 companies that all of us probably use on a daily basis. And you can feel good every time you spend $1 in the store, maybe 1 cent of it comes back to you, right? And some person say, well, 1 cent ain't no money, but again, you understand investments and what's reasonable rates of return, you will find that getting a dividend every year, 1 cent, plus the price appreciating is a good investment. So I think the local market is a good place to start. Again, it depends how much you have to invest, right? Because if you're investing starting at $1,000, it may only make sense to buy one company, but then all of your eggs are in one basket. So the better option there may be to buy a mutual fund that has 15 stocks inside of it until you get to say 5,000 or 10,000. And then from there you can say, okay, now I want to take 2,000 and buy shares of this company and that company. But long term, as you build out and save more, you then start to go into the US market as well, right? So you'll have a diversified portfolio of 60% local, 40% international. When the international market is doing bad, the local investments will probably be doing better, right? When the local ones are not, the international may pick up. So you kind of want to spread your risk as much as possible. So I don't think it's a risk versus that. I think the goal should be to have both in the long term, but the local is a good place to start. Right.
What are your thoughts on financially
Okay. I mean, financial independence is achievable. Of course, it's relative. You have to again figure out what you want your life to look like, right? If you need 60,000 per year in income from your investments, you need $1 million saved, right? If you need 40,000 and you only need maybe 800,000 saved. So what your lifestyle looks like depends on you and how much you will need. Some people could live on 500,000 for the rest of their life, right? You could, and if you have an idea, if you live let's say you assume that you retire for 20 years, we could tell you how much you could spend per year based on what you're earning. You're earning 10%, you might spend 60,000 a year. But if you're only earning 4%, you may only be able to spend 30,000. So again, risk versus return, what you want your lifestyle to be, all of that depends on you. But it is achievable. Some persons are 40, 50 and not enough to retire, but of course they may still work. So it's all in one. I think you had a second part. If I'm being honest, I didn't read a lot of books per se, physical books, but I read the news a lot. So I read like CNBC every morning, things like Reuters, Financial Times, Bloomberg. I go on Bloomberg every day and read. I read the local newspapers as well, right? Every day. So it's just kind of staying aware. The information is out there. Things like ChatGPT, you can find, finding out Apple's investment rationale in Apple today is very easy. You just go. Of course, you don't take everything ChatGPT say 100% and just copy it, but if you need information, it's there, right? And you have to kind of be willing to look for it and search it out.
I would not stand up with I promise you. In this room is about 10% female. In your professional experience, when it comes to investing, particularly in initial public offerings, let's say high net worth individuals. In my experience, in mostly male, why do you think that female representation in investment groups kind of is proportionate to the male?
Definitely.
It's interesting. Well, for one, I think several factors. Unfortunately, you know, this could be a bit controversial, but there are a lot of women-led households, right? Where women have kids and men are not necessarily involved. So, you know, some may feel that they need to be a bit more conservative, or they don't have the ability to take risks. More persons are depending on them. For a long time as well, men have dominated senior positions. In a lot of cases, you see a lot more women in senior positions now, but for a long time, it was man dominated, right? Just like in parliament, right? Also the politicians are men. So I guess some of the men made a bit more money. It's kind of evening out now. And back then too, you had women that did not work for sick, right? And a lot more, that is kind of completely going away. So you start to see more and more females coming in. And women, I think, you know, it's good because I think women are easy to explain things to. They're a bit more settled, I would say, in some cases and some of the men. Whereas men are willing to gamble and take more risks, you know, that we see that less in women. But, you know, I think factors, like I said, such as, you know, being maybe a sole provider, not being willing to take risks, comfortable. I have a grandmother, she only buys fixed deposits. I've been trying to tell her to, you know, invest in something like government bonds, but for her, that's what she knows, and she sticks with what she knows. So there's no perfect answer, but you know, that's some of what we see.
I think we need more financial risk across the board, especially among females. Because instead of maybe just saying weeks ago that from the unemployment rate, a lot of them were young females. So from the financial literacy perspective, I would want that.
I think it needs to start in school. And the reason I think in high school we need to teach persons about things like credit cards and loans, consumer loans and stuff, right? Because you come out of school, you get a job, $250, $300 seems like a lot, right? And then you go and get a car and you start. We see a lot of persons who compounded themselves with consumer loans, not really understanding what they were really signing up for. And some of it too is the economy. The economy is not the same for everyone. Some persons are not doing as good. But you know, anytime I hear someone say they're making the minimum payment on a credit card, it's like, or they say I got a lower payment on my loan. I always ask myself, do they really understand what that means? It just means you're paying more interest and less principal, right? So you pay the minimum payment on a credit card that's not, so you'll never pay it, right? And we should be teaching things like that and really learning before these persons come into the workforce. Because like I said, I just made $200 and I could have saved, right? That felt like a lot of money. And then, you know, as you get older, you start to have kids, you try to get a house or an apartment, and now $200 doesn't work. And you had this loan from back then that you're still paying. And that's how you kind of get in this vicious cycle. So I think as much as the literacy won't save everyone, but if we say 10%, 20% more, I think we make better. And two, a lot of these persons can then pass that knowledge on down to kids, right? And save the next generation from repeating some of the same mistakes.
Thank you, Tony, for the presentation. I know you said you spend about 5 to 10 minutes a month on budgeting. I'm wondering, do you track your expenses daily, or how do you track your spending, set aside what is going on?
I think when I first started out, I was a bit more involved in it, right? Because I did not know like where I would spend, where I would do this. But now that I've been doing it for 10 years, I have a decent idea. So for me now, it's just, I don't need to track that I spent $5 at Wendy's today, right? I just know that this month I made X. At the end of the month, I have Y. Was this how much I thought I would save? It's a yes or no. And most times I know it could be something like maybe I bought something on Amazon or something unexpected came up, right? You had to go to the doctor or something like that. But I think if you're starting out first and you have no idea where you spend your money, then you need to be that involved every day. But if over time, as you start to build it out, it's just kind of like a quick test at the end of the month to see where I am versus where I should have been. And as you progress through, you may find yourself doing it every quarter versus every month. You know, the better you get at it, the less you need to practice.
So what has been your best investment and your worst investment, or what's the rationale?
The best investment I have ever made is probably sport. When that was offered, and I think everyone who invested in it has the same thought they wish they did more. But when it was done, COVID was happening. No cruise ships were there. Weren't sure they would come back, but we took the risk, right? And at the same time, you knew the risk you were taking. So you put $1,000 in it, you know, you'd either make money or you could lose $1,000. And at the time, comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with whatever it is you're deciding to invest in. And now that that is paying dividends, it's been much better than I think even we thought. My risk investment, and I don't think I would say it was a bad investment. I invested when the company Challenger Group or Bahamas Petroleum Company, they were going to drill for oil off the coast of Andres, and they allowed Bahamians to invest in a fund. At the time, we knew if they hit oil, $1,000, we could come 20,000. But if they didn't, it would become zero, and it became zero, right? So, but at the same time, like, because I knew what I was investing in, I knew this was my upside, this was my downside. I didn't like lose any sleep about it. Like, I knew what I was getting in, right? I think the problem is when someone sells you a dream and you buy it, not understanding whether it's realistic or practical, and then you lose everything, you know, those Ponzi schemes and some of these meme coins, cryptocurrency. A lot of persons get scammed, right? When you put your money in these things, you can't get your money out, right? But you don't think of that, and there was time to think of money. So, I think that's the worst performing investment I've had, but I don't see that as a bad investment.
So you would consider yourself very risk averse?
Not really. Once I understand the risk I'm buying, I'm not gonna invest in something I don't understand. Again, if I know something could fail, 90% chance of failing, but I feel good about it, I'll take the chance, right? But the important thing is to understand really what the risk is you're taking. Yeah. But I'll invest in anything. Once I understand it, I think it has a chance.
One of my last questions as well. I know you said some businesses don't make 8% per year. In your experience, you have any insight what some big businesses enter if you're just looking for something to get that rate of return year on year?
If I knew that, I would have a bunch of businesses. Businesses, it's tough to operate. A lot of people are just breaking even or doing it just, you know, after they pay themselves a salary, they're not really breaking it. So I think, like I said, I gave the example with apartments, right? Like people think apartments are automatic. You know, there's so many abandoned apartments because the financials just don't work, right? And then you have to consider all of that. Like if I could make 10% on an apartment and 8% on a government bond, I'll buy a government bond. Because I don't have to do anything. I don't have to deal with tenants. I don't have to deal with hurricane insurance, none of that. So businesses, there are things you could buy a car in Japan, $5,000 and bring it in, 6,000, sell it to someone for 8,000. You've made 25, 30% on your money. But how much times can you do it? right? These things, one off here and there could work. But as you try to constantly, and the larger the amount of money that you're trying to turn, the more difficult it becomes. It's easier to turn 1,000 into 2,000, but 100,000 to 200,000 is a completely different ballgame. So a lot of these businesses you find aren't really scalable, and that's where people run into challenges. Yeah, questions.
My question would be, what advice would you give to business that is growing too fast? Doesn't have the operational efficiency assistant, operate with your workers taking on. What do you get advice to this?
Slow down. I think it's important to you first have to look at cash flow, right? If your business is growing and you get revenue, you're booking revenue but not collecting cash, like at some point it will catch up with you, right? So first thing is to analyze your cash, make sure, and you need proper accounting statements, right? A lot of businesses grow, they don't have accounting systems. All they know is they have enough money today to buy enough product for tomorrow, and then they kind of just go like that. But no, you need to have proper accounting, understanding of cash flow, and make sure you're actually growing. It's just because you have a sale that you never get paid for doesn't mean you're growing. And then that's simple as I said.
Great presentation, Mr. Butler. So my question is, throughout your presentation, I heard one key word, risk. So when you started speaking, I started to think about risk tolerance. And so I can tell you're a very conservative investor. I just wanted to know, what age category would you consider for someone to start to be conservative, intermediate, or an aggressive investor? And my other question is, brokers accounts. Do we need a broker account to invest internationally? And what would be probably the starting money?
So age-wise, typically, they say you subtract your age from 100, and that tells you how much equity exposure you should have. So if you're 20, 80% of the money should be in equities. In a perfect world, right? Of course, some persons don't have the tolerance for that. So you have to understand, like, your age, for example, tells you like your ability to take risks. So if you're young, you have the ability to take risks. But are you willing to take risks? Right? Like, if you're gonna wake up tomorrow when the stock market declines 40% and you can't eat, then you don't need to. Your risk tolerance isn't there, right? So you have to balance ability with willingness. And there are questionnaires you can do to find out your risk tolerance, right? So it asks you, like, if you lose all of this tomorrow, would your lifestyle change, right? If you have, like I mentioned with the example, if everyone in your household depends on you, you potentially need to take less risks, right? So there are things like that. If you don't have dependence or you don't have goals, right? Let's say someone doesn't want to have $1 million saved up, then they can take risks, because if they lose, they don't move. Versus someone who says, okay, I want to leave $100,000 for my child or this. So those kind of factors you have to understand that you're not real understanding of the risk tolerance. But in a simple term, you just take it in from 100, and it tells you what percent of your portfolio should be risky. So as you get 50, you kind of want to be 50-50. As you get 70, you want to be more conservative. Because again, you don't have time to recover like someone that's at age 20. And in terms of a brokerage account, you don't. It depends what you call investing internationally. If you're investing in a mutual fund, you don't have to have a brokerage account. You just sign up for the fund, transfer the funds, and it's invested. If you want to say buy shares of Apple yourself, you may need a brokerage account. Same time, you can do it with an international broker, but you have to get some approval for that, so it gets complicated. And again, if you're investing small amounts, it's not very efficient. To take $1,000 and buy shares of Apple and like this. As good as it sounds to say on shares of Apple, like, it's not the most efficient way of doing it. So you won't get diversification. You have all the eggs in one basket, but announcement comes, stock declines.
Sorry, just a follow-up question on that, right? So you said we would get approval from central bank. Why is that?
Outside of mutual funds, for you to invest abroad, you have to go through central bank. It's what's called the investment currency market, and you pay a premium of 5% plus stamp tax. So if you want to invest $1,000 in Apple, you need like 1,065 to convert to the US, and then you can buy it. It's just the way. It's not, it's called a premium. Now, when you bring the money back, you get like 2.5% of it back. So it's like a net charge of like 1.5%. But if you go to the mutual funds, you won't pay that conversion. Investment currency market premium. You still pay like stamp tax, but you won't pay that 5% upfront. And that was designed to allow the brokers to provide a product for everyday payments in the international market.
Yeah. Cool. Appreciate that.
Well, thanks.
If you enjoyed the presentation, I understand, but please give another round of applause. That was a very intriguing, engaging presentation. We learned a lot about the power of investing and, of course, the mindset and psychology of financial success. I think was most effective for me is a reasonable rate of return. Not everything can get you 25%, 30%, but to know that 4%-8% is reasonable. So that's something that you look forward to. I think that part has been on your sale. So on behalf of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce, the Young Professional Society, our members and the audience here today, we want to give you a heartfelt thanks for your time that you spend with us, and this is just a token of our gratitude. One more round of applause. Chairman.
So hopefully after tonight, you all gonna invest in dollars, right? You know what y'all investing in yet?
Oh, the CFOB.
Got the representatives right in the room. What do you got? You got 3? Yes. Okay, so hopefully everyone learned something new tonight. And as we close on this evening's meeting, I hope that you stay back. You know, what's it called? What's the good word? Fellowship. Yes, fellowship. We have some good, I guess you could say, hand food in the back as well. And of course, our speaker is still here for as long as he decides to stay. And of course, you can tell them with all your questions that you still have that you may not have been willing to ask in person. Okay, so thank you all for coming. See you at our next session on January 21st.